Okay, so this video is going to be talking about the whole story behind why Metroid Other M wasn't really such a terrible game like some people made it sound, and kind of like my thoughts on the whole thing. Okay, now I know this is an old topic, but seeing how I'm a desperate Mega Man fan, I'll be honest with you. You know, when I beat Metroid Other M, I didn't think it sucked like people said it did. You know, I mean, okay, you know, much like the Mighty Number 9 games, in some games nowadays, like Star Ocean 5, and, you know, I think a lot of people need to understand that, you know, people jump to conclusions way too much. And if it's really anything I blame, it's ignorance, because people like to jump to conclusions and think that, you know, the first thing they're reading or being told is 100% true, and that there's no way in hell that it could ever be anything wrong. But I don't blame the people themselves, but rather, you know, like maybe bad, you know, like IGN and all that. It pretty much starts with them because of the reason why these things happen the way they do. For example, let me give you an example. Right? So let's say that, you know, you were reading the reviews for Metroid Other M. Why did a lot of people think it sucked? Well, first of all, a lot of people said that it made Samus look pathetic, but you know, you have to understand where Metroid Other M takes place in the timeline. You know, it pretty much talked about like Samus's first days, or rather, you know, like when she kind of, like she was looking back at her past, you know, when she first started off as a bounty hunter. You know, she wasn't really 100% like, you know, I mean, it'd be like going into the military. Everybody that's going into the military would probably be sort of shaking in their boots a little bit because it's new to them, they're threatening their lives. You know, who wouldn't? You know, it's not easy to be a bounty hunter or some sort of anti-criminal, you know, but over time, you know, Samus's story was that she became so damn good at being a hunter that even the space pirates couldn't even stop her in large numbers, and she was able to kill like multiple, you know, the Federation saw this as an example that Samus was too damn powerful. Hell, if you play Metroid Fusion and you read the whole story, you know, the Federation tries to even kill Samus multiple fucking times, but they can't because she's too damn powerful. You know, it's like, you know, even the Federation and their conspiracy theories, they try to, you know how the Metroid series can be fucking dark and shit, but it's like, oh man, you know, Metroid's not always 100%, you know, for kids and all that. It could just be there to remind you that the universe, you know, the truth that you don't know is probably the scariest proportion of all possibilities. And Metroid Other M did just that. And I'm going to give you reasons to believe why Metroid Other M didn't suck. See, first of all, what a lot of people get wrong about Other M is that, you know, maybe it wasn't, as far as the gameplay goes, I mean, you know, I like to think of it, and you got to really understand this. You know, when the game designers made Other M, it kind of was more of a story-driven game rather than like the gameplay. I mean, I don't really think the gameplay was as bad as people thought it was. I mean, hell, look at Metroid Prime Hunters when that came out. I mean, some people thought that was kind of weird, the whole setup, like having to use a stylus and like the L button to fire. But like, it was one of the most addictive online Metroid games. I mean, okay, you know, it was probably the only online Metroid game aside from Metroid Federation Forces for the 3DS. But, you know, I mean, but it was still, like, Metroid, like, as far as Metroid Prime Hunters went, I mean, and that was a fun game. Like, I mean, to play with your friends, and, you know, it was cool back in the day, you know. But, and anyways, but what I think a lot of people have to understand, though, is when you play, especially, like, when you play these games, Metroid Other M, like, what it did was it reminded us why Metroid Fusion, for example, was scary. Like, for example, Metroid Fusion was probably one of the greatest games that still stands in the Metroid timeline. And if you don't know, it stands as probably one of the greatest games on the Game Boy Advance. I mean, for a handheld game, that and the remake of Metroid Zero Mission were probably two of the greatest fucking games of all time. I mean, you should see some of the things. I mean, just like the cartridges for Golden Sun, for example, like what Satoru Iwata, or not Satoru Iwata, but talking about Golden Sun 1 and 2, you know, like when you had the cartridges, I mean, there were so many things that they were able to do with those cartridges that were able to surpass, like they had like these sound chips that would be enhanced for the cartridges that would even surpass what the handhelds were capable of doing at the time. And I mean, hell, you could even go back further than that, but, you know, that's what effort gave these people. But anyways, you know, that's what like Motoi Sakuraba did, the guy who composed Golden Sun and the Tales series and all that, you know, what he did with you know, he essentially like enhanced like the volume for that. And, you know, if you play Metroid, I mean, he wasn't the one that did the Metroid music, but, you know, but the guy who did Metroid Fusion and Zero Mission's theme songs, I mean, it was pretty damn good, actually. Another thing I think is really cool that you have to understand, though, is like, as far as Metroid Zero Mission goes, and well, not just Metroid Zero Mission, Metroid Other M, as far as the story goes, it kind of explained a lot of things that we probably wanted an answer for. Like, for example, like if you actually think about it, and you really have to dig into this, but it makes a lot of sense. Like, there's been a lot of people that have, like, thanks to Other M, we've learned a lot of things about the Federation. We've learned a lot about, like, Samus Aran's past. Because what's really weird is, as far as the Metroid games go, it wasn't actually in the games that we learned about her past. It was actually in comic books that were actually, I think it was Japanese mangas, which are Japanese comic books in this case. But it was like, most people that I know that live in the United States didn't read those. So, we obviously know what Samus's life was like. But at the same time, though, it's like, they actually wrote about this stuff even in early days, and people were like, oh shit, Samus being a woman, Samus being raised by aliens, and an extinct race. It's pretty damn cool. And what's really scary, though, is like when you really dig into this more, the more this stuff really makes sense. And the Metroid series, it's really fucking scary in some cases. Like, the thing that really scared me about Metroid Zero Mission was like, it wasn't the SAX. Even though that was kind of one of the reasons, but the one thing that really got me about the whole thing was the whole Federation was in on the whole thing. Like, they try to kill Samus and all that. And this is kind of confusing to explain, but I'll pretty much summarize it in a nutshell. It's like, if you really think about the timing of when Samus goes to the, you have like secret members, like the mysterious man the game refers to it as if you play the English version. And I'll tell you right now, the Japanese version is not really too much different, but it kind of goes in depth with the story a little bit. I'll make a translation for the English version and the Japanese version. You'd be surprised that every video game that has like some sort of English translation, even if it's well translated, there's a lot of stuff they leave out in the Japanese versions. Which is actually really interesting, because in the Metroid series, as far as Metroid Fusion goes, there was a lot of shit they explained in the Japanese version that we didn't know in the English version. Unless, of course, you really thought about it, but, like, wouldn't really surprise you either, because the Metroid series does these things, because the stories and all that. But at the same time, though, it's like because of Other M, like, we understand, like for example, the things that scared me was like the whole X parasites and all that, and like understanding that it was a secret like laboratory and all that, where like even like certain members that were on the BSL space station, which was Biological Research Station in this case. I think that's what it stood for. Made sense, but it was an archive station, and it had like all these damn parasites and all that ecosystems and all that, like Sector 1, Sector 2, Sector 3, Sector 4, Sector 5, Sector 6, the restricted lab, and then like the main hub and all that, and then it crashed right into SR388, and then it somehow it blew it up, but it hit it so damn hard it caused the whole freaking planet to explode. Which was funny because like the BSL space station literally looked like it was so damn small compared to the size of that planet, but it caused it to explode, which is really fucking cool. But the way I look at it, though, think about Metroid Other M, though. The reason why I'm bringing up all this other stuff is because it makes a lot of sense what I'm about to tell you. So in Metroid Other M, we know that we saw Samus, like, there was that containment laboratory. Now, what's really interesting is Metroid Fusion is a 2D game. Like, you can see things left and right. But, like, if you were to go to the Sub-Zero chamber, for example, and you would see Ridley there, but you didn't know how Ridley got there, though. Because keep in mind, the way the Metroid games work, Metroid Zero Mission came out, and then after Metroid Fusion, but like, what I'm trying to say is, the Metroid timeline, it's like the games that came out first were actually sort of last in the timeline, kind of like the Zelda series. Like the prequels, they'll make a sequel, if you kind of think about it. So when Metroid Fusion came out, it was kind of like one of the first Metroid games. I think it was Metroid 4? Yeah, Metroid 4. And so, like, a lot of people played Metroid Fusion. A lot of people still remember that game. But there was a lot of things that just, like, you look at these things, and like, how the fuck did some of these things get here in the Metroid timeline? Like, Ridley's DNA, and, so when Metroid Other M came out, it pretty much explained to, Samus, and it pretty much explained to the people that played the games, like, how the Federation got a hold of the Space Pirate DNA, and it pretty much confirmed the conspiracy theory that, the Space Pirates were actually working with the Federation in some cases. And at the same time, though, it's like, it doesn't really surprise me. But as far as the games go, very freaky indeed. Like it's really cool. Like, you know, like if you've ever played Metroid Fusion, you would know like how Samus felt about like when she came to that realization. Like, I mean, it didn't really surprise her that the Federation was doing these things, but when she really found out that they were doing this, holy shit, was she pissed off. You know, talking about how, like, you know, they wanted to like with the X parasites and all that, the fact that they were like mimicking every single fucking organism that they got their hands on, and it's like, you know, even when you killed them and returned them back to their state, and they could reproduce again, or they could just asexually reproduce, like all by themselves. Like, it was so crazy. It really was. The fact that Samus was a Metroid, which is still true. You know, whatever game they make after the Metroid series, if they make another one in the Metroid series like that, Samus is still a Metroid. So that would be pretty cool to find out if they ever do make another Metroid game. I actually want to know who Silex is, though. You know, I mean, I know they say the next major Metroid game that's coming out, the producer of Metroid, it's going to be Metroid Prime 4, whatever it's called. They're going to bring all the hunters back from Metroid Prime 2, or Metroid Prime Hunters, and it's going to be really interesting. Because, you know, imagine, you know, let's say you remember Trace, Noxus, Weevil, Candon, and Spyro. I mean, they explain the stories pretty well. But, like, imagine if they made another game that's centered around, or a whole trilogy, where, like, you know, you got to go to their planets, and you pretty much got to, you know, just figure out who these individuals were. And it's like, holy shit, man. Like, really, holy shit indeed. Like, all the fucking things that Nintendo could easily do with the Metroid series, if they gave it a chance, you know what I mean? If they gave it a chance. But, you know, even to Metroid Fusion, you know, Other M, they'd also explain, like, who Adam Malovich was, because, like, he was dead at the beginning of the game. But, like, you know, Samus would always refer to him as, like, she's like, I used to serve under the name of, you know, she used to mention Adam. And then the AI was like, Adam. You know, the one thing that always scared me about Metroid Fusion, and it still kind of does, when you find out, like, after you get out of the restricted lab, you know, Nintendo, you know, the way Samus goes, before you go fight Meta Ridley, or Ridley X, you know, Samus is confronted by the, you know, the AI, the security camera that she's, you know, that she's named Adam. You know, the game starts like a huge climax point. It's like really scary and all that. It starts talking about how, like, Samus should have done that. She knew too much about the Federation. The Federation knew, like, and they're on their way. And you pretty much learn that, you know, Metroid Fusion wasn't really what you thought it was at first, but then the game feeds you all this, and you're like, oh, that makes sense, but now we're learning this. Pretty well received. Well played, Nintendo. Well played indeed. But it's like, you know, when Metroid Fusion came out, though, you know, if you play Metroid Fusion, and you get to that part at the end of the game, where you find out that, you know, like the robots and all that, like once you kill the security robot, for example, and you get the wave beam and you go to the restricted lab, you find out about the Metroids, the breeding program, and then you get the SAXs there, even though there was like 10 of them on board the space station. Even though you really only see 2 of them, which is actually really interesting. But, you know, the one that was chasing you throughout the whole game was dead on the reserve space station, but then at the same time, now there was another one that saved you at the end of the game, which was actually pretty cool. But what I'm trying to say, though, is this. If you think about it, you know, when you play Metroid Fusion, you know, there was a lot of things in that game that Metroid Other M explained very well. You know, and it possibly actually might explain who Silex is if there's enough evidence to, but no one really knows who Silex is. Could be somebody that Samus has already seen and she doesn't know yet. You know, there's that theory. But at the same time, though, maybe, you know, Samus knows that, you know, like, take Adam Malovich, for example, or however you say his last name. I always thought it was Malkovich, or Malovich, or something like that. I'd have to look at it again. But anyways, you know, Adam was an interesting character. He knew, like, combat. He knew what it meant to be an honest soldier. And he essentially stood by that. You know, he never gave up. And according to the game, he died in the bottle room, at the bottle ship, because he knew what he had to do. And he knew it was going to happen at some point. And, you know, essentially we know that, you know, but, like, while Samus is, like, reoccurring these flashbacks in Metroid Fusion to the AI, she talks about how, you know, she says, like, I won't let this happen, like, you know, referring to the Federation coming and then getting killed by the SAX and all that, because the X parasites, there's no way in hell that the research team could handle the fucking, you know, if Samus couldn't fucking kill the X parasites, then how the fuck could the Federation handle them, you know? So then, like, she's like, I won't allow this. And, 2 seconds later, we hear about, like, her bringing up Adam. And then the machine looks at it, and she's like, Adam? And then Samus looks at the machine and says, like, question mark and all that, with a couple dots. And then it's like, then the music changes. And it's still, every time I think about it, it scares me every time I play that game. The music and the story, the climax point of Metroid Fusion, it's just there to remind us that, that the game, if it wasn't for Other M, we never would have known some of the key points in Metroid Fusion, like who Adam really was. I mean, okay, Samus says, yeah, he was a friend of hers, and he gave up his life. As far as she knows, maybe he's alive still. Maybe he is Silex, but at the same time, maybe he's not. But at the same time, though, it seems weird, yes. But it's like Adam Malevich would be, it'd be interesting, who is Silex? But then again, why was he in Metroid Prime Hunters and all this other crazy stuff if he really was? He has to be somebody who hates the Galactic Federation but knows Samus at the same time, But it wouldn't be, it can't be Adam, the more I think about it, But then again, if we think about it, though, if we think about it really hard, Metroid Fusion pretty much told us that you couldn't trust the Federation, or at least the people in power anyways. What a pleasant surprise. It's like Perfect Dark, like you learn about absolute corruption and all that, and all this other crazy it seems like it's nonsense, but it really does make sense at the same time. And then there's like if you play Metroid Fusion, you also learn about like how Adam gave up his life because he trusted Samus. Everybody else doubted Samus, but he knew. He was this high-in-command processor, or this high-in-command, a lieutenant and all that. And he said that, he believed in Samus. And he said, maybe right now you might think this job is hard, but he's like, give it some time and experience, and you will grow stronger. And he had faith in it. And it was interesting because when we played those games, we found that out. Samus wasn't just pathetic. I mean, you look at, she went from being, like, she thought she was going to lose her life to Ridley a couple times, but then it's like, look at how many fucking times she's killed Ridley. You know what I mean? I mean, we go from Samus is shaking in her boots to all of a sudden the space pirates can't even fucking kill her. You know what I mean? And then after she finds out, like, what she's truly capable of doing, it's not like she's even trying anymore. Hell, even in Metroid Fusion, look at, when you go to get the plasma beam and the wave beam and the diffusion missiles, the robot even said, that the Galactic Federation tried to stop the support, from you getting it, but, somehow you found a way to get it, like they were even taunting Samus, but at the same time, it's like, even they know they can't fuck with her, you know what I mean? Because even if, like, they found out that the Federation was evil, if Samus decided to do something about it, she would turn around and annihilate every single one of them, I mean, it's interesting. It really is. Because most of the time, Metroid Fusion is like going to other planets and like exploring them and trying to understand like 100% like what's going on in these areas. But at the same time, though, it's like, if you think about it, 100%, it's like, what's going on these planets? Metroid Prime 1, like for example, you go to Talon 4 and you land on the planet. Samus is like looking around, like making sure there's like no hostile life that's immediately going to ambush her. And then the game asks you if you want to save, and then all of a sudden, you start exploring and all that, and it was all about like, like it's the atmosphere behind like, how many planets are out there, trying to understand their civilizations. But really, mostly the two things that Metroid Fusion, well, not just Metroid Fusion, but the whole Metroid series pretty much talks about is like exploring an infinite universe. And exploring, like, it's like Star Trek, except without the, the cast and all that, and two different timelines and all that. But it's like, you go to another planet, you explore stuff, you solve puzzles, which is pretty cool. And I mean, it works because the infinite universes and all that. Maybe, hell, we could even go to other planets and all that in the games. And it just works because, like, if Nintendo, like, if they said fuck, like, let's say they said fuck making other games, let's just make Metroid games from now on. They could keep going on and on and on, and it would work. Because you can just go to another planet and build like a solar system from there and all that. So, no matter how much information they go from there, it just makes sense. You know, so if you play all the Metroid games, they pretty much take place in the same solar system for the most part. You know, Planet Zebes, Talon 4, and, you know, like all these other planets that are like really close to each other, Phase and all that, which was actually really cool. I think Phase was the one thing that scared the shit out of me the most was, you know, if you ask me, personally, I think Metroid Prime 3 was probably the scariest game in the whole freaking series because, you know, the Valhalla graveyard and the whole... not just the graveyard, but I mean, like, yeah, Planet Phase was just really fucking scary. It was like, you know, life forms that evolved on that planet, and they were like made of pure Phazon, and they could live there, but Samus couldn't because she was from another planet, and, you know, Phazon's hazardous and shit like that. And then Dark Samus that comes out of nowhere and fucking says, hey bitch, it's time to fucking die. But, you know, Samus kills fucking Dark Samus, even where she literally had all the advantages. Somehow she fucking died. But it was like, you know, the way I look at Metroid Other M, you know, it still had that feel. You know, I think the only reason why a lot of people, like, is because a lot of people gave it bad reviews. It's why I honestly think that a lot of people didn't like it. But again, like, when you think about it, it really didn't suck, though. Like some people made it sound. I mean, it was a game, it was fully functional, and it was kind of fun to play, you know. It wasn't a terrible game, like, you know, like it was improbable, it was unfinished. No, I mean, it was a fully functional game that actually worked. I mean, okay, maybe it wasn't the best designed Metroid game, definitely not, but it was still, you know, for a Metroid game, it was still a Metroid game. You know, you had a different story, different characters, and, you know, but that's what a lot of people have to understand. You know, why Samus whined a lot, why her flashbacks were kind of scary, was because she was going through, like, those were like her first days as a bounty hunter. You know, she wasn't 100% evil, and, you know, but she was, like, there, though, you know what I mean? So, that's what I think the whole, like, what it really comes down to is Metroid Other M wasn't really, like, a Metroid game that, you know, really was there to, like, piss you off or anything, but it was just there to remind us that every single time we play these games that we have to take into consider the unknown in search of it, and how can we prosperly prepare for it. You know, and that's exactly what it is. Metroid Other M, you know, and I mean, and that's why I love the Metroid series. I'm glad they made Other M, because it explained a lot of other games that were just as good. You know, I loved Metroid Fusion, but there were so many questions I had, because Metroid Fusion came out way back in, I mean, I don't remember what year Other M came out. It's been a while. I think it was, what was it, like 2002, 2013, or something like that. But, like, I mean, Metroid Fusion came out, like, way back in 2001, 2002. It came out just before Metroid Prime 3, or Prime 1 did. But it was like, you know, there was so many fucking questions I had about that game. And I mean, like, okay, yeah, it's just a game, and I mean, you know, it's not like, you probably would never get an answer for these questions. But, like, some of those games, like, I mean, like, they were literally 100%, like, I would play Metroid Fusion, and, like, you know, how did Ridley's body get on the SAX and all that, and, or the SAX get on the spaceships and all that, like, you know, to the biological space center? How did the X-parasites get there? You know what I mean? I mean, okay, the game explains that, but I mean, like, you know, like, how the organisms got all this DNA and shit, it was all because of the Galactic Federation. They were doing secret, illegal experiments they shouldn't have been doing. And I mean, okay, we know that much, but, like, you know, you really don't know how much they did. And Metroid Fusion really kind of opened those doors up, as well as Other M. Like, I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that Other M was pretty much explaining, like, those flashbacks, again, I never would have known that shit. Because, like, again, when you go to, you know, like, when you go to the bottling room, for example, like, where Samus, like, you don't, I mean, okay, you can see that Ridley's on the other side of that door, but technically speaking, you know, Samus wouldn't have known that unless, of course, you know, she played Other M. And, you know, she had those flashbacks. So if Ridley's body was stored there since the last time Samus was actually sent there. So technically speaking, in Other M actually takes place in Metroid Fusion too. Because, you know, Samus actually, you know, when she was leaving the bottle room, or not the bottling room, but the Sub-Zero chainment, you know, apparently the BSL space station was actually on Metroid Other M, or something like that. So, really, technically speaking, Samus was actually there in Other M. And I just think it's pretty cool that, you know, Nintendo kind of expanded on that, because Metroid Fusion, if it wasn't for the fact that they confirmed that themselves, I just was kind of scared about that. Like, you know, trying to understand, like, how the fuck is it that, you know, I mean, Ridley, the space pirates, obviously the main leader, the one they keep rebuilding, how is it that the Galactic Federation fucking had their hands on his DNA? Like, where did they get his DNA from? You know what I mean? Unless they stole it from the Space Pirates. But, you know, does anybody really remember... Like, I mean, every time Samus encounters Ridley, for the most part, you know, at what point in Metroid Fusion did they require Ridley's DNA before Metroid Other M that Samus wasn't aware of? You know what I mean? Every other time it was either Samus encountered Ridley and she just fucking killed him right where he stood. You know, how is it that the Galactic Federation managed to get their hands on Ridley's DNA without her knowing? And then they cloned it somehow. Because it's really interesting when you think about it. How did Ridley get on the bottling room? How did the X-Parasites manage to get that DNA? You know what I mean? It's an interesting game that, you know, you could pretty much talk about all these conspiracies. And it's really interesting when you really think about it. Even though it's just a game, sure. But, you know, Metroid Fusion, all the Metroid games have, like, an interesting timeline. And, you know, I'm surprised the game theorist doesn't really do... Like, I mean, you know, people that like to talk about video game theories, like Bat Pat. I mean, I love the guy's videos, I do. But I'll be honest with you, you know, I'm surprised, like, you know, there's actually some really good theories that, you know, I'm surprised he hasn't talked about. I mean, he's talked about some Metroid theories, but I'm surprised, like, him and, like, the Gamer from Mars. Actually, I think the Gamer from Mars really nailed it better than he did as far as Metroid games go, talking about, like, the theories and the whatnot, because there's some really interesting things that people have caught that some people, even people that probably play the Metroid series way more than I do, some of the things they probably never caught over the years, without a doubt. How's that for you? But anyways, the way I look at it, people, you know, Metroid Other M just got bad reviews. I mean, okay, maybe it wasn't the best Metroid game, but not like in the sense like it sucked, but it was a game that was more of a story-driven rather than, you know, with the 100% the gameplay. So the way I look at it, you know, I think we should be more realistic about it and look at it like, you know, look at it like it answered questions for us that we never solved in Metroid. So I think that's what a lot of people should really do. Really kind of look at it like that, because, you know, yeah, it wasn't like a terrible game. It was like, it's kind of like what Resident Evil did. You know, like all the scientists that eventually betrayed each other, and eventually like they came out of nowhere and they were trying to, like, you know, like they were scared and whatnot because they didn't know what to do. You know, all these secret illegal experiments, people getting killed, and eventually, like, you know, all these conspiracies, like all this work that eventually was supposed to be killed in the process, but it somehow survived. And, like, Metroid Fusion is a perfect example of that. And if you haven't played Metroid Fusion, go play it. It's a really fun game, and it's also really fucking scary in some aspects. But I'll leave it to you on that. So, again, comment, rate, subscribe, favorite, share this video with anybody. What do you guys think about Metroid Other M as well as Metroid Fusion, or the whole Metroid timeline? Who do you think Silex is? And if you have any requests about anything, please let me know.